Hello and welcome to New Wave Global, and you are watching episode number 113 of Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed. And we are recording this on the 24th of February, Tuesday. Well, let's talk about something important coming from India. So, India has released its first ever counterterrorism strategy document. It released it on Monday yesterday. So we took a day, we read it uh, to analyze it with you so that you don't have to read it. It's a 9-page document and quite a handy dandy kind of reading, not a difficult reading, because most of it is anyway is like doctrinal kind of a reading, which describes the existing mechanisms. I mean, there's very little about what, um, yeah, I mean, the operational details or how it is going to happen or what new mechanisms are going to be instituted. So basically, let's start from the beginning. So India, this is the first time that India has released this, this document in a consolidated national counterterrorism policy plus strategy kind of framing. And this reads like it's a doctrine-like framing, which attempts to basically unify um, prevention, response, capacity building, legal processes, de-radicalization, integration, internal integration and international, what do you say, cooperation, then societal resilience, all under one umbrella. Something like not so much, but for the Pakistani viewers, like our NAP, National Action Program. So it's a bit more comprehensive than NAP. NAP is more of a agenda item, number 1, 2, 3, 20 points, 12 points. So this one is more, as I said, it's a doctrine heavy kind of a expresses, describes the values, more emphasis is on morality, India's morality. So it seems like the government wants to is too eager to get a legitimacy and seeks legitimacy. So yeah, so the document is called PRAHAAR. Basically, it's an acronym. PRAHAAR, PRAHAAR. So P is for prevention of terror attacks. R is for responses. A is for aggregating internal capacities for achieving synergy, etc., etc. And then H is for human rights. Yeah, well, and then A is for attenuating the conditions enabling terrorism, including radicalization. And then other A is for aligning and shaping the international efforts to counter terrorism. And then R is for recovery and resilience. So Prahar. In Hindi, Prahar means attack, strike, var. In Urdu, we call it var, hamla, var. So uh, echoes more like Mr. Ajit Doval's. Remember that speech which went viral few years ago, actually 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when Mr. Ajit Doval had not yet become National Security Advisor, and he was delivering an address somewhere in a think tank or somewhere, and he was. He was explaining why it is important that India goes for the offensive defense rather than defensive defense. So for offensive defense, he would mean that India should actually be proactive and not just sitting to defend its sitting, idle to defend itself, but to to do some offensive activities. Like paraphrasing. I'm paraphrasing. So he was advocating for preparing and sponsoring and you know. Uh, creating, and helping, actively helping proxies um, that commit terrorism in Pakistan, especially in Balochistan. He said it, Balochistan. He said Balochistan various times. So that offensive defense kind of uh, it reverberated in my mind when I heard Prahar. So um, you are giving your first ever counterterrorism document, and you are naming it Prahar, Hamla, War, Strike. Um, which was like a strange, but because compare it with Pakistan's different attempts uh, formulating the strategies, whether they were internal security strategies or were counter-terrorism or counter-radicalization strategies. They were all named like one was National Action Plan. The other was during Imran Khan's time. It was National Action Plan came after those terrible attacks on Army Public School in 2014, and then there were a couple of other Chaudhry Nisar Ali Khan's internal security strategy, and then there was this Imran Khan's government in 2019 or 2020 probably. There was this another internal security strategy. All were named like, as a matter of fact, national security strategy, national internal security strategy. And the latest one against terrorism, the counterterrorism policy or document or whatever, it came in 2024, and it was called Azm-e-Istehkam, which means the quest for stability, loosely translated. So strike quite different from how Indian government has decided to name its counterterrorism policy. Anyway, going forward, so the Prahar is basically, as I said, doctrine-like language, um, and it has 7 pillars basically, but 2 drivers. So one is, the main driver is a persistent cross-border threat, uh, language, which is the sponsored terrorism from across the border. It doesn't take Pakistan's name. It doesn't take any country's name, but repeatedly says sponsored terrorism from across the border, hostile neighbors. Um, hostile neighbors were using terrorism as state policy. Uh, doesn't name any country. And then the other driver is the new terror tech stack, which is like the tech problem, the drones, the encrypted comms, dark web, crypto, all of these things, cyber attacks, the and also the crime terror nexus. So these are the 2 basic drivers in this document. Uh, Prahar is both you know, a codification of what India already claims to do. It's basically describes. I was just reading it paragraph by paragraph. I mean, I have taken notes, highlighted stuff here, and it's basically describes in the first few pages, 4 pages, 5 pages. Yeah, in first 4.5 pages, it just describes what exists, what already exists. Describes all that, that it claims to already have. The intelligence-led prevention, the multi-agency coordination, and domestically and internationally, signaling that India wants its counterterrorism posture to be seen as a structured, modern, and legitimacy bearing. And there have been explicit references to rule of law and human rights. Human rights has been made one pillar of the policy. So as I said, when I was reading out the acronym, what constitutes PRAHAAR, PRAHAAR, it's basically prevention, and let me just take it out really quick. So prevention, responses, aggregating internal capacities, human rights and rule of law, attenuating the conditions enabling terrorism, aligning and shaping the international affairs efforts to counter terrorism, and recovery and resilience through a whole of society approach. Now, all of these pillars, they are the language that has been used describing all these pillars, 7 pillars. It is of it refers to human rights, it refers to morality, Indian morality, Indian ethical position vis-a-vis terrorism, and on minority rights, on people's rights, on justice, on all of these things. And uh, so in the prevention section, when describing the pillar of prevention, it emphasizes multi-agency, one mechanism that already exists. For example, multi-agency center. It says the operationalization of multi-agency center MAC along with the Joint Task Force on Intelligence, JTFI, in the Intelligence Bureau. So both of these are already there in Intelligence Bureau. MAC, by the way, multi-agency center, it was established in 2001 after the Kargil war. And again, in 2008, after the 26/11, the Mumbai attacks, it was once again intensified, strengthened through the acts of parliament and policy measures. And it has been working since then. And we have seen how efficiently it is working, because it proved completely clueless how to share the intelligence sharing as far as in India's counterterrorism experts, right? It has been a failure for many decades, and it is still so. So, and in this document, which is supposed to be the first, which is the first ever counterterrorism policy that India has released, it describes multi-agency center. It doesn't describe how it is going to be improved. It just describes it exists there, and it describes that it says that it exists there, and so does Joint Task Force, which is also there for a long time. And both of them exist in IB, Intelligence Bureau. Yes, they do. And it then claims that both of these mechanisms will remain the nodal platform for efficient and real-time sharing of CT-related, counterterrorism-related inputs across the country and subsequent prevention against the disruptions. Now, this not clear how it is going to happen, what are the mechanisms, what are the operational details. So we don't expect operational details to come out in the strategy documents, but something beyond what exists is a natural expectation, which this document does not provide. Then it goes on to explain the terrorist and violent extremists misuse internet for communication, and it says that Indian law enforcement agencies are already making sustained efforts to counter the misuse. This kind of misuse, there are on-ground workers, modules through which terrorists are extending logistic material and financial support, and they're saying that India has the mechanisms to counter that. And then it describes a nexus between illegal arms syndicates and terrorist groups, and says that the special emphasis is given for disrupting terror funding networks through legal framework under Indian laws. But we must remember here that Indian government has been the target of very strong criticism from international bodies, international human rights monitors, especially the United Nations, OHCHR, has issued a few statements, very strong statements against what happened in Kashmir after Pahalgam attack in 2025. Around more than 2,600 people were arrested, detained. Many were tortured in custody. There were journalists, there were activists, media houses were attacked by the government agencies under the, pretext of counterterrorism. So a lot happened, and it was resented by not just the people of India, but also from the international watch bodies. And this was all happening under the guise of counterterrorism. In fact, so next they talk about the um, law enforcement agencies and terror funding networks through legal frameworks. Now, the legal frameworks that are available, that are there in India for terror financing, to act against terror financing and counterterrorism, many of the most important of them are UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and the Enforcement Directorate, ED. Now, both of them are notorious for being misused by the government against its political opponents and against the journalists and activists who are raising voice for the rights. Um, so this again, the strategy doesn't speak of it. It doesn't provide any counter narrative to what already is established about these controversial laws and frameworks. Uh, all right. And then it says that India faces threats on all three fronts, like water, land, and air. And then it goes on to say that it has developed the capacities to protect the critical sectors of Indian economy, etc., etc. All that already exists. Okay, the interesting part is the human rights and rule of law based processes, which the strategy claims that Indian laws, including anti-terrorism laws, give due importance to human rights. Well, debatable. Yes, they do on paper, of course. India adheres to the rule of law, where laws are just, applied evenly, and protect fundamental rights. Uh, well, yes, but how these laws are being used is another matter. And you know, UAPA, for example, under UAPA, so many activists and so many human rights activists and so many journalists and so many people from the social media, raising voice using digital media, social media, they have been arrested, they have been charged under this Indian activists describe it as a heinous law. So uh, uh, how can you forget the those activists who were detained after the Delhi riots, during when they made speeches, and there were frivolous cases were registered against them, and Umar Khalid and his friends are still there in the jails without their cases being heard, without them being granted bails. For years they've been there, uh, and all under the pretext of countering terrorism. Basically, the dissent is being crushed, just like in any other country. We have seen this in Pakistan as well, where the counterterrorism laws and legal framework has been uh, disproportionately used against the political activists and human rights activists and journalists. Um, and this is the same happening in India, but the problem in India is that despite purportedly being secular state, secular having a secular constitution, unfortunately, Indian state has succumbed to this kind of uh, you know hate mongering and communal kind of hatred and majoritarianism. All right, so then it talks about special laws under the same human rights section. It says that special laws are in place to tackle terrorism-related crimes, and it then it goes on to audacity goes on to say that Unlawful Activities Prevention Act is the principal legal regime to deal with terrorism in India, supplemented by the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita's 2023, controversial, and it basically Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita is the document that replaced colonial era IPC. And there have been a lot of noise by the liberal, democratic, secular activists in India against against different components of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita (BNS), in which the standard of evidence has been part of discussion, main part of the discussion, in which the evidence is coming next. Bharatiya Saksha Adhinyam 20, that also came in 2023. So under this, the standards of evidence and the custody of evidence and all of that have become so vulnerable to be misused and manipulated, and that has been an issue with the activists for last couple of years. And then it talks about Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023. That also is controversial, in which is being criticized and has been criticized ever since it came into force by India's liberal, secular, pro-democracy Indian nationalists. That is quite amusing to see all of these laws which are being used to actually curb human rights being projected as if they are protecting human rights. Um, anyway, I mean, all the states seem to be doing this stuff in their respective countries. Then the last paragraph of this particular segment about human rights is the multi-level of legal redressal that the document claims is available to any accused through an elaborate infrastructure of justice system, through districts, etc., which is again quite debatable, but states make these claims. Then the next section, the fifth section, is about how the government is continuously making efforts to curb the conditions that are conducive to terrorism. It says that terrorist groups are making efforts to recruit Indian youth, and Indian government is making efforts to thwart these efforts. And Indian intelligence and law enforcement agencies have been continuously disrupting the designs of terrorist groups, etc., etc. Everything that already exists. Then it's so the sixth pillar is aligning and shaping the international efforts. It says that the international partners are very important to Indian counterterrorism efforts, given the transnational character of terrorism. And then it says that besides agency-to-agency engagements for intelligence sharing, India, it says, has entered into various agreements and arrangements like Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, MLAT, and extradition, extradition arrangement, joint working group, and memorandum of understanding with various foreign partners for information and evidence sharing. It also says that India engages with the international community in various counterterrorism forums. Bilateral and multilateral exchanges of global best practices in counterterrorism field are immensely helpful in creating a holistic national response against terrorist threats. Although India did not respond to Pakistan's offer to work on investigation, all encompassing investigation against the perpetrators of Pahalgam attack. Uh, then the last part is recovery and resilience through the whole of society approach. Now, it says that it will work through, the government says that it will work through partnerships, public-private partnership, partnership with professionals like doctors, psychologists, lawyers, members of civil society, including NGOs, the religious and community leaders, to sensitize and reintegrate the affected community. An other important element of this document is that it painstakingly, describes uh, India's, yeah, India's approach of not linking any particular religion with terrorism. So, as I said, it seems to be an effort to, an utmost effort to rebuild the legitimacy, rebuild the international trust, international image, the national image also, because India's own people, the liberal and secular and pro-democracy Indian patriotic people, they uh, have been, they have, after a slumber of a decade or so, they have now seem to be woken up to the situation in their country. And in our we are going to cover in our next couple of episodes, we are going to cover what is happening in India, and how some positive, very positive things are happening in India, vis-a-vis, anti-Muslim violence, vigilante violence, etc., etc. How the civil society has woken up to it, and how elements within India, within Indian society, are now standing up to that kind of hate mongering, which is uh, very reassuring and very positive uh, news. So just in the end, I will. Uh, so I wanted, it's been quite a while, I think more than 20 minutes now, but I just wanted to talk about little about how Prahar would compare with Pakistan's Azm-e-Istehkam. As I said, the name also gives a bit of indication of how what the approach is, but and I'm not going to glorifying Pakistani establishment's approach to counterterrorism, because everything that I have said about India's Prahar, I think it seems to be true for Pakistan as well. How legal framework has been used to curb dissent is, lesser said the better. Because it has been highlighted for so many times by so many Pakistani journalists. So, and we will keep highlighting it. But since right now we were talking about Prahar, India's this document of counterterrorism policy and strategy. So that is why emphasizing Indian government's duplicity, which is not very unique. Indian government is not alone. I think we have seen our regional governments, including Pakistan's own government, not just curbing all of these rights exactly at par with how it is happening elsewhere in the world, but also completely shrinking civic space under the garb of counterterrorism efforts. So coming back to Prahar and Azm-e-Istehkam, I will not go point by point because there is no time. We in some other episode with a couple of other guests who are more knowledgeable about the terrorism strategies and mechanisms in Pakistan. We will discuss. We might actually go into the point by point comparisons and what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses of both the strategies. But I would just say that one thing that stands out is that in India's Prahar, this is a, as I said, strategy document. It's a doctrinal language. It seems to be meant to function as as an umbrella for counterterrorism across, prevention, response, law, legal framework, institutions, and international cooperations. On the other hand, Azm-e-Istehkam, Pakistan's Azm-e-Istehkam, it's not a comparable policy document. It's, in that which is available in the public domain in the same sense. It is at best, it's a government approved vision or campaign framework to invigorate basically to, the counterterrorism um, uh, efforts and which are explicitly linked to implementation of it was revised, the National Action Plan and multi-agency action. And more importantly, the civil military fusion was very strong. Comes out very strong when you look at the Azm-e-Istehkam, because it comes out this Azm-e-Istehkam came through the Apex committees, which is a military dominant governance mechanism, while the Prahar comes, from Ministry of Home Affairs, uh, a civilian agency, no part of the military anywhere. So that is the basic main difference for me. And there were other differences as well, Azm-e-Istehkam. I mean, both adopt a whole of the state language. That's also very clear. Prahar, also intelligence-led prevention, multi-agency coordination, same is the language in Azm-e-Istehkam, multi-agency, national vision, reinvigorating NAP, and implementation, the operationalization of various mechanisms, same as in Prahar. Also, both of these documents uh, they um, uh, they foreground prevention and disruption of terror infrastructure, not only post attack, post terrorism response. So this is also a similarity between both of them. They are the third. I should have said it first, but uh, just came to my mind, not in particular order, but just came to my mind just now, is both are framed in cross-border threat narratives. Prahar seems to be focusing on Pakistan, and Azm-e-Istehkam seems to be focusing on Afghanistan, threats coming from Afghanistan at that time when it came in 2024, probably because India, Pakistan, India uh, terror response, it heated up after Pahalgam. So, Azm-e-Istehkam had already come in June probably of 2024. So at that time, Pakistan-Afghanistan border was, hotter than Pakistan-India border. But India talks in the language that very clearly is targeting Pakistan. So that's the similarity come difference or whatever. Um, but both of these documents also diverge sharply. As I said, there is a civil military balance and ownership, civil military ownership in Azm-e-Istehkam. Prahar is purely civilian initiative seems to be civilian initiative is actually. Um, but see, so many differences. I have written them down, five, six differences, but I will not go into that. When we compare both of these documents, Prahar and Azm-e-Istehkam, we are not merely, comparing two counter-terrorism frameworks. We are actually examine how these two states are redefining the relationship between security and democracy. India presents Prahar as a modern, rule bound, intelligence driven doctrine. Yet this claim must be assessed against a domestic political climate in which civil society groups, opposition leaders, journalists, and minority communities have repeatedly alleged misuse of legal instruments such as Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA, and Financial Enforcement Directorate, ED, uh, and how these mechanisms have been heavily misused against dissent. At the same time, uh, we must point to a broader environment of majoritarian politics, including rising anti-Muslim, anti-Christian, anti-Dalit rhetoric, and vigilante violence against them. And the shrinking independence of large segments of mainstream media. Everyone now calls them Godi media. It's coming from inside India. In such a context, counter-terror laws, they risk becoming elastic, you know, capable of addressing genuine security threats, but also susceptible to political instrumentalization. Pakistan's Azm-e-Istehkam faces its own long-standing civil military imbalance and governance deficits. Ultimately, in both the countries, Pakistan and India, the decisive question is not whether the state can mobilize force or not. It is whether counterterrorism remains rightly bound to constitutional safeguards, minority protection, and pluralistic democracy. Because one counter-terror frameworks, once, sorry, because because once counterterrorism frameworks blur into tools of political control, the boundary between security and repression becomes dangerously thin. And that erosion, in the long run, weakens the state more than it protects it. And then society also starts disintegrating. We are seeing this in both the countries. So I think that's all for now. And we have just unraveled Prahar, and we will keep unraveling these issues coming from all around South Asia in our coming episodes. Please keep tuning in. We will be more regular now. And if you really like this episode, do encourage us by giving us a thumbs up. That will mean hugely. And also, I would be really grateful if you could subscribe to New Wave Global, because that ultimately supports us. We do not rely on advertisements, because we think your support is going to keep us going. And that's what matters. So thank you very much for tuning in. Have a good one. Till next time, have a good one.